So I'd just like to welcome everybody to the People's House. And we hope that we give you an opportunity to tell your story. We're kind of waiting on a couple other people that are getting warm. And probably already a little hot in the collar in a few places. So we thought we'd go ahead and get started. And I'm just welcoming you here because I don't have microphone. We can all be civil and enjoy tonight. Thank you all for being here and showing an interest. We have a commission meeting on the 12th. You're all welcome back. We love that crowd like that. All three people that come each time. We'd love to have you all. Take care, and I'll turn it over to Mark.
Hi, we are so glad to have all of you. This is our 6th stop so far on our CERS roadshow tour, as we're calling it. And this is a really large crowd. It might be our largest. So we are very appreciative that you all are here. I'm Brianna Carroll with I am the Governmental Affairs Manager for the Kentucky League of Cities, and I have some representatives from our coalition here as well. You want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Joe Baird, President of Kentucky Professional Firefighters and a retired firefighter from the City of Ashland, and so a retiree under CERS hazards.
I'm Shelley Hampton with the Kentucky Association of Counties. Thank you all for being here. This is fabulous.
So how many of you are in CERS? Excellent. How many of you are in Tier 3, the hybrid cash balance system? Okay. Okay. How many, we appreciate you. How many of you are in Tier 1? Okay, great. And 2? Okay. So obviously all of you have heard that the governor's consultants released their recommendations. If you haven't, I'm sure you'll hear more tonight. I want to remind everyone that those are recommendations from the governor's consultants, and when it comes to a special session, the governor cannot file a legislation. He can only call the special session, and so it is up to the legislators to file that bill. And so what we are hoping for during this process, and why we've asked all of you, or we've created this forum, is to let you all know what we did during the 2017 session by proposing a bill for separation of CERS, but to also help you understand what's at stake. And we've been addressing rumors, and now I think we know what the possibilities are, and so we're hoping to engage you all even further in the process to help us. So with that, during the 2017 session, actually started in 2016, we started drafting a bill. We met with Senator Bowen and talked with him about the unique nature of CERS and our idea for separation. And it took nearly a year to draft Senate Bill 226, which is this lovely, nearly 400-page bill. And it's a beauty. If you all ever want to read it, it's very special. And all that it does, and the reason it's so big, is because it takes the current statutes from the Kentucky retirement systems and KERS, because they are together, KERS, CERS, within the statutes, very commingled in the statutes. And we provided CERS their own statutes. So it's basically mirroring. The only thing that it does is it maintains the benefits, the contract, everything in place except for the administration. It creates its own board for CERS. So I want to talk about where we are now. In 2012, we went through the exercise of a pension task force where Pew, a national think tank, came in and helped the legislators work through pension reform. And as a result, in 2013, we saw the passage of Senate Bill 2, which created Tier 3, the hybrid cash balance system. Which was important because at that time our rates and the system was a mess. It was we were supportive of this to help ensure stability for the system. And it also ended the unfunded COLAs. They were automatic unfunded COLAs, and when we talk about how did we get to the fact that CERS employers pay 100% of their contributions, but they're only nearly 60% funded, that's part of the problem. So we changed the language to say no more automatic COLAs until the system is 100% funded. So that occurred for employees starting January 1, 2014. And obviously, it takes 5 years to vest, and so we don't even have employees that have vested in that system yet. CERS is 63% of the membership of the Kentucky retirement systems and 73% of the assets. So 63% and 73% of the assets, and those are very important to remember. Because with that, we have only 6 members out of 17 on the Kentucky Retirement Systems Board. This is very important for our urging of separation, because when we went through the exercise to get to Senate Bill 2, everyone recognized it was a collaborative effort, and everyone recognized the majority of CERS within KRS, and so there were additional seats added to the board. When Governor Bevin entered office, he reorganized the board and changed the number of members and added some more appointees, which marginalized the CERS representation. And we are not here to knock those changes at all, because he has added many members who have great expertise in the investment world. The issue, though, for us is more so the representation, but also the fact that now there is a precedent that's been set where the governor has complete control of the Kentucky retirement systems and also can name the chair of the board. And so when we take that into account with the fact that we are 73% of the assets and 63% of the membership, it's concerning for us, because we also hear Governor Bevin talk about the fact that there were wrongdoings by the previous administrations for the retirement systems, and that possibly criminal activity, mismanagement, all of these things. We've had, as we've been dealing with pensions for our organizations, we've experienced some troubles, whether it be trying to address pension spiking and having resistance from the Kentucky retirement systems and other things. So remembering, you should always remembering what we've seen in the past and seeing what we have now, we are very cognizant of the fact that Governor Bevin will not be in office forever. And there is a real concern with what happens when he's gone. And we are at the mercy of the Kentucky retirement systems and whoever is within that administration. And for us to have 73% of the assets and 63% of the membership and not really have a say is a problem for us. We're also not talking about, part of the proposal is to freeze the assets or your current benefits and to all future earnings to go into a 401k. We are advocating for maintaining the current CERS system, because we're not talking about employees with large salaries. The average annual benefit for a CERS non-hazardous member is $11,000, and the average annual benefit for a CERS hazardous employee is $25,000. And so for us as employers to look at the current situation that we have, where some would say the 401k stops the digging, the hybrid cash balance stopped that digging, and it only provides for those in Tier 3 4% guaranteed, and that was explicitly removed from the inviolable contract, so that's flexible. If an employer can't afford it, if the CERS can't afford it, then we can say, hey, we need to lower that. But it at least provides that flexibility. And so that's important, because our recruitment and retention issues at home on the local level are a little bit different than what they are for the state. And so we want to make sure that we're able to have an input and what we provide our employers, our employees, and what we can, because we know what we can afford as well. And so as we look at what Governor Bevin is proposing, obviously there are many other state pension systems that falls within the state budget, and he knows what's best for his recruitment and retention, or he'll deal with it, and he knows what he can afford because that's his budget. And so what we're asking for is local control of local pensions. It's very simple. We want to be able to have that input because recruitment and retention is important. And when you hear those numbers where $11,000 is the annual benefit for non-hazardous and $25,000 is for hazardous, I mean, it's difficult to recruit employees for that and retain them. So when we talk about as well for being isolated from politics and not wanting to be held at the mercy of whoever's in the administration, it's important to remember that currently you are not allowed to sit on the Kentucky retirement systems if you are in an elected office. So on our new board that we've proposed, there are 3 current CERS representatives. One is in the room tonight. I won't point you out. There are 3 current CERS representatives on the Kentucky retirement systems, and our new board, the proposed board, would transfer those members to the new CERS board, and also have 3 members with investment experience and 3 members with retirement management experience. No elected officials on the board. CERS has been on an upward trajectory since Senate Bill 2 passed. There has recently been a slight dip, and that's because the assumptions were changed by the new board and increased some of the unfunded liability and employer contribution rates. It's another reason that we're advocating for the separation, because we want to make sure that we have studies done that would impact our numbers and our contribution rates that are solely on CERS. We want to make sure we have an actuary that's focused on CERS as well. We applaud Governor Bevin for discussing the state pension reforms and also his additions to the board, but we always want to make sure that people understand the unique nature of CERS, because the state does not appropriate any revenue from their budget to the Kentucky Employee Retirement System. We are expected, I don't know how many of you are really familiar with the way the retirement systems works, but you have an amortization period on your public pensions, and it's very similar to your mortgage, like a 30-year mortgage. And so in 2013, when we went through the Senate Bill 2 reforms, part of that was to reset the amortization period and set that to a 30-year period. And so CERS is expected to be fully funded by the end of their amortization period, which is very, very important. 100% funded. When we filed this bill in this session, it gained a lot of traction, and we really weren't ready for it to take fire. I mean, it was. We were pleasantly surprised, and I think it caught a lot of other people by surprise, including the governor. And so it passed the Senate committee unanimously, 10-0, and the governor's office went over to the Senate and said, we don't want you to do this, and the caucus met, and they continued to push the bill through. And then the governor called and had a conversation with the sponsor, and they agreed to not pass the bill. And everyone, our lovely sponsor there has just entered the building, Senator Bowen, and they agreed to not push the bill any further, with the promise that CERS separation would be part of the discussions moving into the special session. And so there was this press conference. And so we were very happy with that. And so then we've turned it into a campaign, because we have not had many conversations, to be quite frank. And we want to make sure, because we have 260,000 employees in CERS, and this is a lot of people, and we want to make sure that you understand what we're doing. So part of KER, whenever you hear Kentucky has the worst funded system in the country, that's not CERS. And although it's not in great funding status, that's also because it was on a downward spiral until 2013, where we made those changes, and it will continue to go up. We want to applaud, I think, all of the legislators, because when this happened during the session, we continued, even after that press conference, to have senators join on in co-sponsoring the bill. And we continue to have wildly widespread support for this legislation. And part of this is because it makes sense. We don't want to be coupled with the arguments of being the worst funded in the country. And every time, you can look at 2008, 2013, 2003, every time there have been changes to the Kentucky retirement systems, they're made across the board of KRS. And it's unfair, I think, when CERS employers pay 100% of their contributions and they don't have a say in what the benefits are that they provide to their employees, and they don't have a say in what they're paying. And so we want to make sure that we have that full discussion outside of just being lumped into the Kentucky retirement systems. The bill, I think some of you, we ran out of folders, and I'm sorry, and there are sign-up sheets that if you sign in, we will be sending out all of the materials within the folders electronically. But there's a sheet in there that has several of the questions that are commonly asked, because it's very important for you all to know that we're not advocating for changes. We firmly believe that where we are and where we're heading is the right path. And I want to make sure that we recognize the elected officials in the room, whether it's the city and county officials. We appreciate your support and for being here. And we have several representatives and senators here, so we appreciate you all being here. Because next, after we're finished talking, we're going to have a question and answer. And for us, that's the most important part, and that's really why we're here. And so we want to make sure you all are heard as well. But if any of the senators and representatives want to talk, you just want to keep listening, totally fine. Want to make sure you know we're going to let you talk if you want to. So anyway, Shelley, if you want to go ahead and say a few words.
Sure. Again, thank you all for being here. This is the best crowd that we've had out of the 6 groups. So thank you all for taking the time out of what for most of you is free time to come down here and to learn more. We certainly hope we get some questions from the audience, but we do really owe a debt of gratitude to Chairman Bowen for his leadership on this, for his continued leadership on this. We very much appreciate his perseverance. This took a long time to write and to draft and to redraft and look again and draft again and try to get everybody at the table to come to a compromise. You know, that's how legislation works. You don't always get everything you want. I don't know of a bill that gets filed that stays the way it started out. It's really tough, and even the new folks that are in their first term can tell you you'd love it to be that way, but you have to compromise and you have to work together to get what you can live with out of a bill. So, Senator Bowen, thank you very much for your leadership and your continued fight on our behalf for this very important issue for us. So some of the things, and I have to thank Brianna every time we do this, because she devoted her life for a year to this issue just for the bill, and way before that to dig in and really get into the weeds of the issue, because as you tried to follow her and listen to everything, you know, it's a very complex issue. It's tough to sit down and talk to folks in a 10 or 15 minute time frame and explain all the issues that have gone into the bill and that go into talking about the retirement system. And I'm sure Senator Bowen could probably do it in his sleep. So I know he's talked to, and all the legislators here have had meetings with various stakeholder groups trying to listen to them and get feedback. And so that's that's also what we're here to do. So I'm not going to take a whole lot of time. I just wanted to re-emphasize, you know, you all have paid your part. You've paid your part out of your paycheck every 2 weeks. Your employer has paid their part from their employer contribution into the county employees retirement system. And so this, we felt like separation was the best way for us to protect that and to protect the employees who pay in and the members who pay in to the system. You know, and Brianna touched on recruitment and retention. You know, we struggle with that now as it is. The Christian County Jail, for example, has over 30 open spots. So with the hybrid cash balance plan right now in place, they struggle to fill those spots. As he told us at one of our recent meetings, you know, why would you come, if it goes to a 401k, if future hires are changed in CERS to a 401k system, I have no way to compete with private employers because I certainly can't afford to pay my employees what I think they're worth, but what they're earning now is really not enough. But I cannot compete with the private sector. I can't just go raise my prices on a product and hope to bring in extra income that way. And so it's very tough for recruitment and retention purposes as well. And I know there's been, a lot of people have used the word panic. And we don't encourage anyone to panic before they know what is going to happen. As the governor has stated over and over again, Senator Bowen, President Stivers of the Senate, and Speaker Hoover, the leader of the House, have all said, you know, there will not be an emergency clause on whatever bill they file, whatever bill passes, which means it will not go into effect the minute that the governor signs it. That he has very thoughtfully said, we will give everybody time to discover what's in it, what it means to you and your family, and to give you all time to look at that and see what is best for you all to do. So we would encourage our folks and everybody out there that's in a system and that's close to retirement or thinking about, should I do this? What's going to happen? There is no bill, let me be clear, there is no bill draft out there. This was from this past session. That session is over. So there is no draft out there. There's no plan that has been put forward from the executive branch or from the legislature. So I just wanted to be clear on that. There's nothing hidden. If you want to look at PFM, I would encourage you to look at that report. We can get you that website later, but I strongly encourage everybody in this room to look at that. You can look at the summary that they presented to Senator Bowen's committee on Monday and go through that. And see what that third-party independent recommendation firm has decided to put forth for the legislators and the executive branch to take a look at and go from there. But there is no set plan yet, and so please get on that website and do yourselves and your families a favor and take a look at that, and then let's go from there. But just a couple of other points. You know, we would like this bill to be in whatever they file during the session. Do we think we'll get every single word in this bill put into the next bill? I don't know. We don't know the answer. But when we say separation, Senate Bill 226 is what we mean by separation. So, you know, again, we hope that that you all will take the time to get yourselves educated. But the best thing that you can do is ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer those. And at the end, we've got some note cards for you all. We've tried to make it as easy as we can. We'll send those out to the audience, and all you have to do is write a very nice, respectful note asking your legislators to support separation. And one other phrase that you have probably heard a lot about is the inviolable contract. And for CAECO, that's our overarching goal. While we are definitely supportive of CERS separation, that inviolable contract needs to be maintained. And to their credit, to the person, I have not heard one legislator say they want to break that. They respect that. They understand that. They're not trying to do that. But to say there's no crisis in KERS, I think, is to ignore the facts of the situation. But we're here to talk about CERS, and again, we appreciate everything that you all have done to make yourselves available to be here, and look forward to your questions.
And like I said, I'm Joe Bear with the firefighters and plan participant. And first of all, I'd like to thank my brother and sister CERS members for attending, as well as the local and state elected officials. I solely agree on everything these two ladies have said, and I have a few additional things that really are unique for the most part to the hazardous duty side of CERS. And the one thing that we found that a lot of legislators weren't aware of, and really a lot of the plan participants themselves weren't, is the majority of firefighters in Kentucky, professional firefighters in Kentucky, do not participate in Social Security. So any reduction in benefits, you know, they can't handle it. You know, you look at me, I'm a retiree. I never paid into Social Security. That was my employer's discretion, not mine. So I have no additional income to rely on. And so that we want to make that very clear. And there are, I believe, members under the non-hazardous that do not participate in Social Security. So I think that really needs to be considered in Frankfort. Another thing that they have brought up is, you know, with the recruitment and retention, we're already seeing that. I know you've already heard that statement made, but that is a fact. You know, I do know for the hazardous duty side with police and fire and correction officers as well. And a lot of that is due to Senate Bill 2. So what we're saying, we're not saying any changes to Senate Bill 2 or to the cash balance plan. What we are saying is we cannot sustain any further reductions in our monthly benefit upon retirement. And thirdly, and they have alluded to that as well, is by separation, of which the Kentucky Professional Firefighters unanimously endorsed this separation in Senate Bill 226. But in doing so, we'll have our own board, and it does take the politics out of it. You know, we just saw 2 months ago where the Board of Kentucky Retirement Systems, we believe, erroneously changed the assumption rates. You know, that they dropped the assumption rates on your return on investments from 7.25 to 6.25, I believe. Was that not the case? And 2 weeks later, they get a report that the investment returns were 13.8% this past year. So where was the need to reduce it? So like I said, we're bringing all these issues to light, but those are some of the three issues that really I try to add from an employee aspect. And let me say as well that I may be the only employee representative on this panel, but I am by far not the only employee group that has endorsed this piece of legislation. I believe we have, what, 23, 24?
24, and we have one that's inquiring to join as well.
So just to close my remarks, that you know, as they've stated as well, you know, what we're asking you to do is help us to encourage the members of the General Assembly to endorse and support Senate Bill 226 with no changes, and that is very important as well. You know, that's if things get in there and they start cutting and adding, and we've seen that happen many times, I know most of us have, then it may be something that we can't live with. And it may start cutting into our monthly benefit, you know, for our retirement security, and we cannot have that. The involvable contract is another issue, and something else that hasn't been brought up is your health care, your retiree health care. That's, you know, there's been many statements and remarks brought up on that, and that's on the chopping block too. So keep that in mind and remind your legislators that as well. And I know they brought that up as far as the cards, but you know, we ask you to contact your legislators. Don't contact them just once. Contact them often. You know, you have via email, phone calls, you know, everything else. And I'm not asking them to harass you, believe me or not, but we have to get our point across. This has to be the most serious issue that could come before any of us. You know, it could eventually be an attack on our retirement security, and we have to take it as that. We have to stand up for the benefits that we've earned. As she stated, that, you know, we're not getting rich in our retirement years, $11,000 and $25,000 averages, and we can't take any more reductions in benefits and have any kind of dignity in our retirement. I'll close with that. Thank you.
So we want to go ahead and open it up to questions and answers, because I think that will, instead of us continuing to talk and provide more details, I think that way we can get to some of the important parts or questions that all of you have. I think there's a mic that works as well, or two on both sides if that's easier, unless you have very loud, confident voice that you think we could all hear you with. Yes, ma'am.
I hadn't thought about the health insurance aspect until he brought that up. Does Senate Bill 226 address, would it be a self-funded or a standalone, or would it still be with state insurance?
Great question. So the question is, did Senate Bill 226 address the health care coverage? And what it did was it allowed the CERS plan to participate in the state health exchange like it is now, but it also provided language that allowed for it to go out on the open market to price to see if there's a better deal. The only thing with that is that it maintains the current language that says that the benefits have to be of equal to what the current employees are receiving. So it does maintain that language. So I mean, because we all know that just because it's less of a cost doesn't mean you're getting the same benefit. This many people, no questions? Okay, great.
Obviously, one concern about pulling CERS is what effect it has on KERS. Are the investments commingled? Is there a risk to KERS by pulling CERS out, other than the administrative sharing of costs?
So there are many, I think there are, it's not necessarily commingled, but in the sense that because it's under the Kentucky Retirement System's umbrella, that when they make investments, it doesn't show up as CERS investment or KERS investment. It shows up as a Kentucky Retirement System investment. And some people are really big nerds and they have alerts on those. So when you see those, they're not just for CERS or KERS. They will take money from the different pools, trusts, and make large investments. And so with that, you could say it's commingled in that sense. So what happens if we separate? So currently, there are times when KERS needs cash, and they sell the stocks for KERS or the investments for KERS. CERS will buy them out. They'll take CERS money and provide the cash, so then it becomes CERS investments. We've had the discussions of what happens, and that is a possibility. It's also a possibility that we maintain those investments together and until they're finished. Sometimes they're 5 years, 10 years, whatever, if they're locked in. In terms of other sharing of costs, it would be the administrative expenses, and CERS pays 63% because that's the percentage of members that they have. And obviously, when you're handling investments, the larger investment pool you have, it affects the economies of scale. For CERS, it's not that much of a hit because we're pretty much taking the economies of scale with us, as we have 73% of those assets. For individuals who would criticize and say, well, that hurts KERS, then I have said, when you look at, some people would argue it's a duplication of systems. It's an additional bureaucracy. It's really not for local governments and for CERS because we're only paying this one administration. For the state, it's important to know that there's KERS and SPRS under the Kentucky retirement systems, but there's also the teachers' retirement system and the legislative and judicial retirement system. And the state pays for those 3 additional administrations for the retirement systems. And so I would say, before you criticize us for creating a duplication of those systems, you need to probably look at yourself and put those together. And there is an idea of coupling all of the investments, and that would make up for the loss from CERS pulling out. If there's more discussion on that, I would probably say, well, then if then CERS or KRS has become a local government subsidy, if CERS pulling out is impacting KERS anymore or keeping it afloat. Otherwise, it really should not have an impact on KRS. It's a long answer to that question. Yes, ma'am.
Does the Senate Bill 226, does it affect, like if you're in CERS
Grab that mic.
and plus KERS? So like if you're in 2 different systems, how will the new Senate bill affect those? Does the years carry over?
Reciprocity is, we left that in the bill because that would be a reduction in benefits. Because we could not change that. That would be a reduction in benefits, and so that is maintained within the bill. So we support that. Yes, sir.
I'm with you, because the court, I was just kind of curious as far as the status of other courts, and I believe the city of Henderson has done this as well, passed a resolution in support. Do you know what the percentage so far may be of the courts and or city governments? Because hopefully as the time comes for the special session, we can show that a vast majority of these courts and city governments. Do you know yet what maybe that is?
We are at nearly 100. The issue with that is the Kentucky League of Cities passed a resolution supporting it, so we sent that resolution to our membership and said, we've passed this resolution, here's what we passed. In terms of what the cities and the counties, if they're passing them, the fiscal courts and the councils only meet so often, and I think as the time has gone on, we will, and as it's continuing on, we will continue to see more and more cities and fiscal courts passing them, yes, because I mean today I saw copies of 5 more today in my email. So many of them are alerting us when they pass, or they're sending us the copy of the resolution, or we'll see it from the local papers reporting it. So it's been great. We're at 100, but not enough. So if your city or county has not passed it, I would encourage them to do so.
And now that PFM is out, our board also passed a resolution, and those will go out as well. So the fiscal courts will, and any associations, any area development districts, any special purpose governmental entities that want to pass those resolutions, I'm sure we're happy to share those with folks. Yes.
I just want to make sure I understand when you're saying separation and make the accountability local. So that means like Davis County would handle our part of the CERS, or how does that?
That's a good question. So CERS is in its separate trust right now, and all that they do for KRS is pay the Kentucky Retirement Systems to provide the administration of the entire the county employee retirement system. That's school boards, cities, counties, etc. All that this does is say, we no longer want to pay the Kentucky retirement systems to handle our retirement, to manage our retirement. We want to provide our own management. And so it creates a CERS board, and just as KRS has now, and they would be able to hire their own executive director, hire their own staff, hire their own actuary and investment consultants to do that. It does not any benefit. We don't handle benefit changes. We don't want benefit changes. We're not advocating for benefit changes within CERS language or reforms. That would have to be addressed at the legislative level. So that's nothing that can be changed from separating CERS.
Okay.
I want to make one point here, if I may. I don't think it's been addressed here this evening, but for CERS, and I think a lot of people have some confusion on this. You know, it's funded solely by the employer, be it your city, your county, your district, whatever, and the employee. There are no state allocated budget dollars going to CERS. It's strictly ours, and so that's what we have to consider here too. All these other plans that she mentioned, as far as state police, teachers, KERS, the state employees, the legislative, judicial, all those have state budget dollars funding those. So we are a unique entity. So, you know, that's what I've said 6 times now. You know, it's our money, it's our plan. Let us manage it the way that we see fit. And so what she was saying, all we're doing is taking CERS that's under the umbrella of KRS and sitting it over here with its own board. That's it, with no changes.
Yes.
Okay, I was under the impression that you said that that you're advocating for no benefit change. Is that a real possibility or a no possibility? And the other part of this question would be, is the retiree health care, when we retire, we are automatically given a free health care under what we are now. Is that also written into the new, is that going to be written into the new bill as well?
So Senate Bill 226 from this past session is what we as the coalition support and the language that we support. So I'll speak to that, we have provided no changes to the current benefits. Your health care, whatever tier you're in, so you're in tier 1, none of your benefits would be impacted. In terms of what's on the horizons for the special session and the bill that will be filed during the special session, we don't know. And that's really why we're here, is to let you know what this coalition has supported, what we've done on behalf of you, and we want to make sure that you understand what has been recommended by the governor's consultants. So that is what is in front of the legislators to review and to use as recommendations as they craft a bill for the special session. The important thing to remember is that you can't get angry at your legislators if you don't contact them before they take a vote. You can't go, I mean, it's unfair, I think, to go to the voting booth or the polling place and say, you know, I'm mad at you for taking this vote, if you didn't contact them ahead of that vote. And so right now, till the end of the time when that bill passes at the end of the special session, which has not been called yet, it's up to all of us to talk with our legislators and to make sure they know what's important to you. And our message is to sustain, maintain CERS, and to separate. And that's part of what's in that folder is a contact sheet with your legislators, who their Twitter handle if they have one, their phone number, their email address. We also have the cards that we'll pass out for you to write your name and address in the return, because it's important for them to hear from people in their district. As we are representatives for our organizations and associations, we can only do so much. When we go to Frankfurt and talk to the legislators, they say that's great, and sometimes, a lot of times they'll listen, but we're only so effective until we have the help of their constituents. And so you are all constituents of a representative and a senator, and so we need your help. And I would recommend and urge you all to not just contact them once, but to use every form of communication that you can, and that's social media, that's a phone number, that's an address, a physical address, or that by mailing them something, and that is an email address. And it's important. I want to make sure that you all know, because the recommended changes are as bad as you've probably heard. And right now, this is when they're all formulating the plan for what they're going to do. So please contact your legislators.
I think it's helpful just to follow up on that. You know, I forget sometimes, and this has come up at family reunions and other points of discussion, given my line of work, that I work in a bubble. We work in a bubble sometimes, and you all aren't up there every day. And so it's helpful to know that, you know, once the session starts, it's almost too late, because the special session is just that. It's special. It's extraordinary. It's not supposed to happen. And so therefore, it's not really budgeted for. And we're all sitting here talking about this issue because of one thing, and that's money. And so the legislators and the governor, typically, traditionally, historically, they don't like to call special sessions. Nobody enjoys having to do that. And so they try to minimize that as much as possible. And it takes 5 days to go through the process. It has to go through the process, and 5 is the minimum number that you can get a bill through and get to the governor's desk to have that governor sign that bill. So once that process is set, they are trying to work on this right now. They're here trying to gather information too and feedback from you all, but they are formulating that bill right now. And so we can't wait to talk to you all once the session starts, because they're trying to save as many taxpayer dollars as they can to go up there, do what they have to do in 5 days, and get out of there, so they're not spending that money. So they're very cognizant of that. They're very sensitive to that. So we need you all to call this week, and we need you to call next week, and we need you to call every week until that session starts. And then start during the session, but don't wait until that session is called. If they come out tomorrow and say, hey, October 15th, we're going to have the session, don't wait till October 14th. Please don't wait till then. And and contact them. If you're on Twitter, follow them on Twitter. Social media is getting to be more and more powerful as a means of communication. But the handwritten notes are good. Talking to them is good. But please don't wait until that session starts. It's too late. Who's got the next question? We've got to have another question.
Before I ask my main question, I want some clarification. I only started looking into this yesterday because I saw a billboard on the wall and wanted to come see what this was about. SB 226. SB 226 is what we want put in front of the governor, the way you have it right there. KRS, our CERS is not funded by the state at any level, yet if a change happens to KRS by the state, we're blanketly included with no say, or with very little say, not enough say to stop it. So the answer is separation is what we want to keep everything we have right now the way it is. No matter what changes they make in the future, we can keep our retirement the way it is.
There is no guarantee. CERS separation is what we want.
If we separate and then they make a decision based on this report from Monday, it wouldn't affect us because we're separated.
There are absolutely no guarantees of what's going to happen in the future. No legislator in this room can tell you that. And even if we do separate, that does not mean that the employer contribution rates are going to go down. That does not mean we are still subject to legislative action.
Okay.
Every bit, just like we are now. It's just it will be a separate board. It will be a separate system so that any changes that need to be made to KERS, they only have 13.8% of the money they need to pay all the benefits. And so we understand that changes, we've supported that in 2013 when changes were made to go to the Tier 3. But we didn't feel like that those really needed to be made to CERS, but they certainly have stopped the bleeding. And so now we're back on an upward trajectory. But there's absolutely no guarantee. You can't bind a future General Assembly and tell them they can't do that. So we just feel like with this separation in place, it will be less likely. But I don't want anybody leaving here thinking there are any guarantees for any future legislation.
And if I can add something here too, anything's possible in Frankfort. And there's a possibility that changes could be made to 226 and then separated. That's why we're saying we want no changes to 226. Separation's it, with no changes.
All right, so 226, no separation is what we're looking for.
No changes. We definitely want separation.
No changes.
Yes,
226 with no changes is what we're looking for. Okay, so my main question was, in January, this passed unanimous through the committee. There was a second reading, and everything was looking good. And at the beginning of March, it was all put on hold. What happened to derail the momentum that it had? What was the trigger that caused that to stop? Why was the decision made? Why did the sponsor pull?
It passed the committee unanimously, and the governor called and asked for it to be stopped.
We didn't make that decision.
Was compelling. So more than us, which is why we need your help. Please contact your legislators. The first part of your question there are other systems, and I am going to get probably the crazy eye here in a second. There's another active system out there that is separated, and Lexington Police and Fire. And they're out there mad. We want to forget they're there. Just like we would hope that if we separate, they forget that we're there too. But the state does not, there's really no, I guess, I don't want to get into that. But the state does not, when they make changes, like in 2013, they didn't touch Lexington Police and Fire because Lexington is in charge of, Lexington pays the bill there. Lexington, Lexington maintains a board that oversees it. And so our hope would be that when the state recognizes that, hey, we can't afford to pay these benefits, or they want to make other changes, that they just address their own. And if we get into a situation where we want to, then we go to the legislature and say, we need some changes, and and have that individual conversation rather than, oh, hey, one of our systems that we're responsible for is one of the worst in the country, and so we need to make changes to everyone. Yes, sir.
Senator Bowen, he would know what stopped the bill from proceeding. Let's ask him.
the governor called Senator Bowen and asked him to pause the bill. Do you want to say a few words?
So that's a good question. And look, let me begin by saying that this, without question, is the greatest fiscal challenge that the state's faced probably in our history. And there are a lot of hard decisions that have to be made. And when we're talking about, at a minimum, a $40 billion liability, we have to make these tough decisions. And this can has been kicked down the road for far too many years. So while there is much angst out there amongst you folks and every other community across the Commonwealth and the taxpayers, and I understand that, we are the first body that has taken this crucial issue up. We have said enough is enough. This cannot continue to be kicked down the road. The day of reckoning has arrived, and it's not easy. I've spent countless hours dealing with this issue. I was the advocate, the sponsor of Senate Bill 226. It made sense to me for all the reasons that Shelley and Brianna have articulated. And we did get it a long way down the tracks. And the governor did come to me and asked me if I'd pump the brakes on this, because it had a lot of momentum. And he assured me in that conversation that when we got down to all of the nuances that are involved with this special session, that this topic would be front and center. And I can assure you, I've been in on every pension conversation, I dare say, that's taken place in Frankfort, unless there was a private conversation between two legislators and they didn't want me in on it. But any conversation of any substance of people that are ultimately going to make the decisions, I've been in on that process. And I can assure you that the governor has kept his word that this topic would be front and center in the conversation of pension reform. We have spent more time on separation than any of the other issues, and there's a bunch of them when we talk about pension reform. So to make that very clear. And while I have advocated for 226, like it is, I'm only one voice in this process. I think at the end of the day, separation will happen. But I'm kind of known as Mr. Transparency in Frankfort because I introduced Senate Bill 2, which actually got this whole process started. And Senate Bill 2 gave us the capacity, the ability to look inside of the pension systems and see what was actually going on. So some of them have kind of kiddingly nicknamed me Mr. Transparency. So in that vein, in the interest of full transparency, I will tell you folks tonight, because I'll not shy away from this, and I know some of the things that I say are not very politically expedient, but that's okay, because I'm not there for political expediency. I'm there for good public policy. But in saying all of that, I'm going to suggest to you that in getting separation, it probably will not look like Senate Bill 226. Will it be close? Yeah. Will it have the real meat and potatoes that are in Senate Bill 226? Yes, I think that it will. But will it be the identical language? No, it won't. I can't get there.
Why is that?
Well, because there are other people that have different views of what separation should look like and how that should be managed and how much leverage and autonomy we should give to the CERS system. It's part of the process. It's part of the political process. And I think Brianna and Shella will tell you that I've done all that I can do in that regard. I've advocated for this. My name is on that bill, as is the name of a lot of other legislators, most legislators here tonight. But there are other people involved, And at the end of the day, while I think it'll be a good bill, I think it will get you where you want to be. I don't think it'll have all of the language in 226 that everybody's advocating for.
I do want to make sure that we are very appreciative of Senator Bowen's efforts. We sat in his office in the annex and pitched him this crazy idea, and he studied it, and he was a trailblazer out there for us and did put his name on there. And but it is important for all of us, as he says, he's only one, and that's why we encourage you all to contact your legislators, because we did go through reforms in 2013, and I don't want to argue with you, but we did go through reforms in 2013 that were substantial. Ending those automatic COLAs that was a big deal. That was so controversial. And for those of us who had to put our necks on the lines, for our associations that went out and supported it, it was a big deal. It was a fight at midnight in that I mean, it was one of the craziest things that I've ever experienced. And I've been up there, I'm not very old, but for 12 years. And my whole career's been working on the state pensions. And it was especially for a Democrat majority in the House to pass reforms that ended a DB system and created a hybrid cash balance that only gives 4% to employees who are on average making $11,000 or having $11,000 benefit in a non-hazardous seat in CERS and $25,000 in a hazardous is a big deal. And so we want to appreciate that and make sure that wasn't for naught. And for us to sit there and not recognize the importance of that would be wrong for you, or for those of you who are the guy over there that's in the Tier 3, because you're not even vested yet. We don't even have employees that are vested in the system. So we want to make sure that we don't forget those reforms and the importance of those. However, it is an open and a fluid process. So we do want to make sure that you all contact your legislators, and there are parts to reform that if we see separation in a bill, it doesn't mean that we're going to continue, that we will support it just because there's separation. And I know that Senator Bowen understands the needs and the unique nature of CERS. But there are other legislators out there who might not be as, I mean, it is a very complicated system. And we want to make sure that we will not accept reforms that would put CERS in on a death spiral. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable for us. It's not acceptable for you. We are making sure that we protect those in CERS, those employers and employees. But there are things that are negotiable, and so we'll continue if we're invited, because we want to make sure the promise of collaboration. We're hopeful that will come to fruition soon, and we want to keep that open dialogue. So.
Gave the opportunity for this separation to occur. It was a good route for eventual separation. So my question is, are we going to go into the legislative special session process, come out with no separation, and then it be taken up at a later date potentially? That's the way the PFM reports seemed to kind of lean. They were creating this overarching board that was overall investments for all systems, and then it sounded as if it would facilitate the future separation of CERS, is the way the PFM report read. So
how many of you saw the report and are happy with the report? I mean, so how many of you are not happy with the report? So I just want to say we are honored that the PFM report did not approve of CERS separation, because I would hate for you all to appreciate that. So we were okay with that because the only entity or individual or anything that has come out opposed are the consultants, are the governor's consultants, PFM, and we have yet to have a conversation with them. Otherwise, I think there is broad support for CERS separation because it makes sense. The CERS employers are liable for their or are responsible for their liabilities, and they fund their system at 100%.
And the overarching board, if you go on on the website and look at the PFM report, it's on slide 35, and they talk about savings that could be realized possibly by one overarching retirement investment board, but that is not part of what we want in 226. It almost defeats the purpose of having someone else again. We would just be continuing what we're doing now. And so, no, we would not be for, I mean, if all the state sponsored systems would want to do that, I think they could definitely realize a savings in that kind of volume. To take the teacher's retirement system that's separate, to take the judicial form and the legislators' retirement systems that are separate, and to take the state police and the Kentucky employees and put all those under one overarching board, that's fine. I mean, all of their funding comes from the same place.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that are negotiable. That's a non-starter. I mean, there's no reason to separate if you can't control your money. Otherwise, we would just be sitting under the Kentucky retirement systems with 6 out of 17 members. It's essentially the same thing.
Can I say
Yes,
one thing
sir.
to that effect? Okay, I want y'all to understand just a couple of things. There's 8 different pension systems and 8 corresponding health benefits out there. So that's the complexity of this. So when we wade through all of this, how does a change in one system affect a change in another? And that's part of what we have to deal with. Something else that I think it's very fair to mention tonight, that when the board made the assumption changes that they did, taking the discount rate from 7.25% to 6.25%, and the payroll growth from 4% to 2%, that increased the liability considerably, which means that your local governments now are on the hook for a much higher contribution, and it's a challenge. I think in my own community here in the city of Owensboro, it's $1.5 million, $850,000. So, and Owensboro, you know, is maybe in better shape to make that payment than some other communities across the state. So you have to understand that. And one other point I want to make. It's going to cost the state of Kentucky an additional $1 billion in pension obligations this year. And I think it's since 2008, the pension systems have paid out $1.5 billion more than they've taken in. These are some of the challenges that we're dealing with. So we have to look at this from a global perspective and do what's right for all the principals concerned. And that involves 8 different systems, 8 health benefit plans, all of you folks, and the taxpayers of Kentucky. So getting to a solution that satisfies everybody is a tall hill to climb. But we're committed to doing that. We are committed to doing that. As daunting a task as that is, we are committed to doing that. But in that process, common ground has to be achieved somewhere along the way, which means there has to be give and take. That's the political process, and that's what we're engaged in right now.
One thing is he brought up the changes in the assumptions. We need to have prudent numbers and data-driven numbers, and that's very important. So when changes are made that are made from a KERS or state-centric basis that impact CERS, that's not fair. And when we recognize the fact that when you change assumptions, they have real-life consequences to the employers. And for the local governments, you know, that's pulling cops off the road. That's, you know, there are real life impacts on that. So if you study pensions and changes to the assumptions across the nation, I'm sure you all do that like I do, it's very common to phase in the assumptions. There are two different ways to do it. You could phase in the assumption rates, or you could do something that some call direct rate smoothing, where you smooth in the impact of the hit on the contribution rates. We sent a very lengthy, detailed email to the board and to some other individuals, and it was ignored. And that was another concern for us, to not want to provide any consideration for those for those serious impacts of changing those assumptions like that in such a opportune time as right before a special session was another reason for us to continue on towards the path of separation. But we would never advocate for using false assumption rates. It doesn't help anyone, it doesn't help an employee, it doesn't help a retiree, because you have to be funded, and it certainly doesn't help an employer in the long run either. So, yes.
Think about this, I feel like Bruce Springsteen. What is the opposition? I mean, what are their arguments to not do 226 in full? What are the the arguments they offer as to why they don't like it the way it is? And if you said that and I didn't catch it, I apologize.
I feel like he's at a town hall meeting right now. This is terrible.
So there are those that are advocating for a 401k or a DC plan, a defined contribution, as opposed to a DB plan. There are those that feel like that, and I'm talking for others, that's the question that you ask. There are those that feel like that even though the CERS system has made 100% of the ARC payment, it's still only 59% funded. So there's a question there. Why, if you make 100% of the ARC payment, why are you only 59% funded? What's different? What's happening within that system itself that would cause that? There are those that are concerned that if there was separation, total separation, managed by a separate board, that they could change the assumptions. You know, I could make this pension liability go away tomorrow if you let me set the assumptions. I could say that we're going to have 25% return on our investment, and we're going to have 10% payroll growth. And guess what? We don't have any liability. But those are unrealistic. That's not going to happen. So there are those that are concerned with a system that goes its own way. How responsible will they be in setting their own assumptions? How will they manage their money? And will it ultimately fall back on the state of Kentucky if things don't work out? So those are some of the concerns that people have, and they see an efficiency with all the systems being combined and managed together. Because there will take another, that'll have to be staffed up. The CERS system will have to be staffed up. They'll have to have all the folks that are in place with KRS will have to be in place with CERS, or those that are concerned with the overhead expense that would be involved, and the transition of it all, and these types of things.
I'm so glad he brought all those up. So if we were in the discussions, I would say to that, number one, why are we only 60% funded? Well, because we were on a downward trend before the reforms in 2013 that stopped the digging, stopped the unfunded COLAs. In terms of why else, if you want to talk about assumptions, well, that's because when the state mandated that cities, counties, school boards being CERS, the state has always been in control of that board. The state sets the assumptions across, they have always set the assumptions across the board. That includes their payroll rate, their payroll growth. Our payroll growth is not the same as the state. Our funding status is not the same as the state, and so our liquidity is not the same as the state, and we shouldn't be investing the same as a 14% system. And so with the reforms of 2013, we've continued to climb. We are climbing. There was just this little dip where the assumptions were changed. But other than that, and even after that, we will continue to climb. So again, we say, let the reforms from 2013 work. Now, for who's going to manage the money, the bill sets out in place the board and then the committee, the investment committee, that not only could be comprised of the CERS board members, but to also allow investment experienced individuals to sit on a board. Because why would someone with investment experience want to sit on a board where you have to also participate in other committees such as disability and those in audit committees? So we would love to have people's experience that are true investors. How will they how do we know that they'll continue to pay? Well, the statute requires 100% funding. How do we know that they'll mess up their assumptions? What will they mess up their assumptions? The statute requires that the assumption rates be based on actuarial recommendations. And although people want to criticize what the actuarial assumptions were set at, that's also important to know that on a 30-year average, CERS has made on their rate of return 8.5%, and on 15 years, 7.72. And nationwide, the average is 8. So we are now at 6.25, and that's great. It's always great to be lower because you're assuming less and eventually you'll pay it down sooner. But we also need to recognize that although the numbers should be prudent, we can't be too conservative that are beyond what the realistic number could possibly be, because there's real life consequences in order to pay that bill. But that's all covered within the language that you sponsored. For those that, I don't even know the rest of the point.
Will it fall back on the state?
Will it fall back on the state to pick it up? So currently, language provides a couple things very specific to CERS. Only CERS, not the other systems. If there's an employer that stops paying their bill, it provides language that says that the system, CERS, can seize assets. Although as a city representative of the cities, I don't really like that someone could seize assets, but it would allow the system to seize assets. It would also be able to kick them out. But if a city, say a city goes bankrupt, just as it is now, it's a pooled system, and that's part of the risk, but that's part of the beauty of the benefit to share costs. And so everything is spread out across the system, just as it is now. There's language, section 52, if any of you get really bored and want to read those 400 pages. Section 52, page 169, provides language that says, it clarifies and makes sure it's very explicit because we don't touch the inviolable contract, but that employers are responsible for the liabilities. Section 12, page 52, says that maintains the language that employers are responsible for paying 100% of their contribution. And the only way that you would have a situation where the state would be responsible is if there were no more employers left in the CERS system and the state dissolved all cities and counties. I mean, that's just not going to happen.
I'd like to reference one thing that Senator Bowen brought up too, as far as some had just the ideology of 401k. They don't believe in our defined benefit plans. And the one thing, if you approach your legislator and that's said to you, ask them where are the disability provisions and the line of duty death benefits provided in a 401k. There are none.
We really, I don't think it's to anyone's intention to not support CERS separation. I think it's the unknown, or it's not knowing and not understanding, and I think that's to the fault of those who won't allow us to be part of the conversation. truly. That's all it is. I can answer. You have a question?
I do.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about a component nobody's talked about yet.
Let's
and
do
I want
it.
you to correct me, and I believe this gentleman here will know about the health care. Okay?
Yes,
So
sir.
I don't pay Social Security. So my pension's all I got to live on.
Neither do I.
But a few years ago, they did come in. Now, I can't tell you how many years we pay Medicare now. So as I understand it, okay, I'm 63. So in 2 years, I'll be 65. So now that I pay Medicare, the transparency part, the way I understand it, they're kicking me on the Medicare on the federal government's dime, and the state is off the hook for the lion's share of the bill. Is that correct, as I'm understanding it?
I'm not, you'll have to speak to this. On the hazardous duty side, the state picks up a supplement.
Yeah, it'll be a
Medicare.
supplement, but they won't be paying the lion's share of my health care. So that's a
correct.
savings to them. Anybody that's lucky enough to reach 65, and a lot of people are pretty close to that when they retire, they're only going to be on the hook for a total bill for me for 2 years. So then the federal government's, so they're saving a lot of money. So that was one thing that came out of the last Republican governor who did nothing, Governor Fletcher's Blue Ribbon Panel, who said they wanted to touch the inviolable contract. They told them to stay away from it, but they did say, which scares me, that they don't have to fund the insurance at the levels they fund it now. So when you hit 65, they're not really funding it at a full level. The federal government's taking over. That's correct?
I guess, so to speak, yes, sir. You
So
know,
therefore
I know
the-
it, well,
so-
I just know, you know,
so
I know
therefore
you
the pension
transfer over to
system,
Medicare, so, you know.
Therefore,
but
the
you paid
pension
into
system
Medicare
actually
that-
saves money once you hit 65 on your health care.
I would assume so.
Okay, that was my question.
So as Senator Bowen said, he is one person. So again, we cannot underscore the importance enough to give him some help to help us. Have your legislators go to him and say, I support what you are trying to do for the system. He cannot do it alone.
What we need are 19 more Senator Bowens, and we need 51 Senator Bowens in the House. And that's what we'll go around the state, and that's what we're going to ask for. So.
Yes, did you sign in? Just want to make sure everyone, if you sign in, our intention with that is to send all the materials that are in the folders electronically, and to also make sure that we keep you up to date as there are updates for the special session and kind of where we are, if there's other events. Yes, sir.
2 questions. What is the proposal in Senate Bill 226 for sick days? There's been a lot of talk about sick days spiking retirement. I haven't read the full bill. I'd like to know what the proposal is. And also, explain a little more what the board would look like with separation.
Okay, so we did not touch any of the benefits there. We did not make any changes to that. The board would be, there are 3 members on the Kentucky retirement systems for CERS right now. We transfer those over to the new CERS board, so they are no longer on the KRS board because KRS would no longer need CERS representation. And then we would have 3 individuals with retirement experience and 3 individuals with investment experience, and all of that criteria for the experience is laid out in the Transparency Kings bill from this past session, Senate Bill 2. So it's very strict experience there, it's high quality.
And I think you made the statement in previous meetings that with 63% of the membership and 73% of the assets, up until recently, there was no CERS representation on the investment committee. Is that correct?
Yes, up until very recently, like very recently.
Right here.
I think they heard us on that complaint. Right. Okay, so the amortization period is just like your mortgage. If you finance your mortgage for 30 years, so most public pension plans have an amortization period. Ours is 30 years. It's very, very typical. And so when we went through the reforms in 2013, the amortization period was reset because of all of the hefty reforms that increase costs. And typically you'll see a reset of the amortization period to help smooth the increase in costs. So we started 2013, that amortization period reset. So ours at 2015 is when it started. So ours ends in 2045. Even before, even with that, after now the assumption changes, our amortization period, our actuary and another actuary shows that we will be fully funded at the end of our amortization period, and that takes into account all of the statutory requirements of CERS, no COLAs until 100% funding. So no COLAs, the current benefit structure, the assumptions, et cetera, and it shows continuous path and eventually being 100% funding and even more at the end of it. Yes, sir. So that's a great question. The state is definitely seeing the hurt, I think, for all of their obligations for the state systems. Those obligations are not CERS because those are on your CERS employers. So when they say, you know, we are going to need to come up with $700 million more dollars or $1 billion, that is not to pay for the CERS system. And that that is an issue for the state, and so we respect that. And we, I know we do not, we're not going to get into the business of dictating what the state does for their employees. KECO's in a little bit of a different situation because they have a few members on their board that are KERS participants. But as far as us, you know, we are, I've always said, help us help you. Let us out, so that you don't have to deal with our people calling you every time pension reform's discussed. You don't want every road worker and fireman and mayor, council members, city workers, county workers, school board members, your cafeteria ladies. You don't want everyone calling you every time, because we don't want to change our system. And focus on your problems. Focus on whatever you need to do to pay your bill. There were years where there has been underfunding. The PFM report states that that is only 15% of the issue, and but that does not impact CERS. Underfunding for their systems that they're responsible for does not impact you if you're CERS. So that is a concern, and we just want to make sure that we're not lumped into.
They're in separate trusts. The state under the KRS umbrella, the Kentucky Retirement System, you have 3 separate and distinct trusts. You have the Kentucky employees, the county employees, and the state police. So there is no one cannot pay for the other.
Have they ever taken any money out of our pension fund to pay other funds?
They cannot do that. They can't. CERS money is held in a trust for CERS.
Maybe I don't understand. Then how do we go from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3? If everything was fine or that we're benefiting ourselves, how do we drop all the way down to a tier 3 in our retirement system?
Well, that's because we're under the KRS umbrella, and there have been benefit enhancements. And that's important because the state made benefit enhancements for all of KRS, and that's a concern for us as well. You know, we want to have more input into what our we want to be able to say, yes, we can afford this, or no, we can't. And at one point, the systems were 100% funded. And those were days long ago now. And that's due to benefit enhancements, benefit factor increases that were mandated by the state. Those are due to several other things that we've discussed tonight. But how we've gone to Tier 3 is also because we had to do Tier 3 in 2013 because we were struggling and we needed to stop the digging. And so that's truly why there's a Tier 3 that we believe worked, and we want to see vindicated all of the efforts that were there, so they can play out and we can watch the path to sustainability.
So if the time goes up and we get closer to 100% funded, is that Tier 3 going away to go back to Tier 2, or does that stay forever?
You can't. We don't want to go back to. You can't drop a tier, because you wouldn't want me to drop Tier 1 or Tier 2. But at some point, if there is, I mean, I definitely would not advocate for any benefit enhancements until you were in a position where you were more than 100% funded, and that's also why we saw in 2013 the ending of the automatic COLAs, because that was a huge cost driver and why the unfunded liability increased so much. And so now the law states that we cannot issue COLAs until we are 100% funded, and that was a hit for some employees, but that's really important for the long-term solvency of the system. Yes, sir. Ma'am.
I would like for you to speak to the issue that the gentleman brought up about the sick day.
We did not address any benefits in Senate Bill 226.
No change.
No changes. We just took the language on sick days and from what it is currently for KERS and CERS and put CERS to have its own statute with the sick day language. Now, that is definitely something that's on the table that the governor is advocated for changing, and that will be part of the discussions as we move forward. But we did not advocate for that in our language. So the idea would be that we go into our own system so that when there is a discussion for reforms, that they are solely addressed for CERS and the needs for CERS. And that's kind of where we are now. The state needs money to pay their bill, and we recognize that might have to do some things to be able to make that burden a little less. And but it doesn't mean that CERS needs to be held hostage and at that mercy as well. So
we are still subject to legislative authority. Period. There are no guarantees that if we get separation, there won't be a bill filed in the future to change our benefits again, and we'll have to continue to use data to fight that fight. We have to have data. It all comes down to the data.
And going through the legislative process provides that checks and balance. We would not
does.
advocate for those changes to be made at a board level. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the employer match is anticipated to go up a considerable amount, my understanding. With the separation, is it anticipated to continue to stay that way high, or will it possibly in the future go down a little bit? I mean, I know it's assumptions, but...
It's assumptions, but obviously your assumption rates have to be set by an actuary, an actuarial recommendation. And so if that's what the numbers show, that's what they are. I mean, you don't want to play a numbers game, because that's not going to benefit anyone in the long run. So, but hopefully, as the system continues to go up and rise, then the contributions balance out.
More likely than being separated rather than being combined.
Well, right now, I guess what we would say is that we would hope that our investments would be solely focused on the needs for CERS, and that would be a huge benefit, and that our actuaries and investment managers would be solely focused on the needs of CERS. So that should be a benefit.
Oh, over here.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I don't necessarily have a question, but I would like to take this opportunity with our legislators here with an active ear to take the opportunity to say that as public servants, all of the people who are in this room, we've given many years of our time, talent, and treasure to serve the constituents that you represent, and we've afforded services to ensure the quality of life, safe communities, protected communities, and communities that thrive in all aspects. And we've afforded opportunities for people who cannot help themselves to receive the assistance that they need to live a healthy, fulfilled life. So we do ask that you take that into consideration. I will say that of the folks, of my fellow employees that I have with me, we have a combined years of service of experience of about 160 years. So we've put a lot of our time and a lot of our talent and a lot of our passion into serving the people that you represent. So we would desperately seek your support of Senate Bill 226.
Thank you. And we are very appreciative for the legislators that are here because we've invited all legislators spread out for our forums across the state to at least one of the forums. And there's been a great attendance. Representative, you've been to another one, haven't you? Yes. Yes. Yes.
This is the biggest.
Other.
This is the biggest turnout we've
It's
had
the biggest
of people,
turnout.
and this is the biggest turnout we've had of legislators. And as a native of Davis County, and I'm really proud of that. So.
Senator Bowen is great. I mean, he sponsored the bill. He truly is a champion for the issue. We have some other legislators who were fortunate enough to have the. Where's Senator Wilson? Maybe he left. Oh, Senator Wilson. He was a co-sponsor of the bill, so we are so supportive of him. And we have other representatives and senators who have been very outspoken on their support, and we are very appreciative of them. But just to come to listen, thank you so much. It helps us. It helps everyone to be able to. Yes. So yes, ma'am.
Cards, make our calls, send our emails, and make our voices heard in plenty, as it has been said, it has been done before, and the governor makes a phone call and says, no, I don't want this to happen, where does that leave us?
I think, to be fair to the governor, he wanted it to be part of the discussion and to have it a part of special session so it can be part of the discussion. It would be unfair if he did that again, but I think we've all respected that, and so it's part of the discussion for special session. We're here now. For the cards that you all are going to fill out, if you put your name and address in the return part of the envelope, if you know your legislator's name, write the legislator's name on the front. If you don't know your legislator's name, that's okay. By your name and address, by your address, we'll look up your legislator for you. If you write a personal note inside, it's very important to not just say separate CERS, but to sustain, to maintain the benefit structure and separate CERS. And we will drop those off at the annex for you. Otherwise, it's on you. We'll do that for you, but otherwise we need you all to contact your legislators. Thank you. Are there any more questions?
So if it doesn't go to separation.
No, you're fine. Yes?
Where's that going to leave you? I want to know where you're going to be in this umbrella of KRS in 5 years.
I have no idea, but because if there's no separation as is, then I don't know what kind of shape I'm going to be in as far as with my retirement security, because I don't know what's going to come out of the legislature at any time. So even if we get separation, I can't answer that question where I'm going to be in 5 years, because anything could change. We're trying to deal with this now, and that's all we can do is take care of the here and now and worry about next year.
Yeah, one step at a time. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate you. We'll be around to answer questions. Please fill out those cards and leave them with one of us or at the podium. We'll pick those up.